Hi folks, welcome back to Connect Chase Paranormal Investigations, and I've been wanting to sort of tell this story for quite a while, but I wanted to tell it maybe in a way that I don't come across as a complete nut jar. So, because I think once you start going down a rabbit hole of telling stories like this, especially if they're personal accounts, they can actually make you seem like a bit of a lunatic. But yeah, I'm gonna tell it anyway. So essentially, and I was gonna tell a series of events, stories, not stories. Stories make you they sound like that I've created them, or I've made them up in my head. These are things that I believe happened, and I wanted to tell them in sort of like some sort of orderly fashion, because the whole weirdness kind of started back in, I suppose, 1978. Um, and But fast forwarding to 1989. So, um, what basically happened was we moved house in we moved house in one area in 1985, and we moved about sort of 7-8 kilometers away. And the area that we moved to was we were in a really really big house. And I don't know whether I'm gonna put the picture up as a thumbnail, but we're in quite a big house. It was quite long, and we had if you can imagine the garden. We had a lovely garden, and it went down, and then we had an orchard, which was probably about how big would that be? About 20, 25 meters, sort of square. And then after that, there was like a lot of it was a bit of a jungle, or overgrown grass, you could say. And what my dad did, because he didn't want that area just to be there, because it would have meant he'd have to build big fences and stuff around his area. So he actually rented that little bit of that grass, which was probably about another 40 plus meters long. And yeah, I helped him sort of tend it, basically. So we had a long garden, and our house was looked down his garden, but also beyond the garden was a quarry. And yeah, I mean, that was impressed. That went, a couple of kilometers back again. Um, at the front of the house, we were on a kind of main road, and across the road was fields. So we were sort of in the countryside, whereas where we lived before, it was very urban in Birmingham. Even though it was North Birmingham, it was yeah, quite an urban sort of surroundings. But here we had, gardens, orchards, grass, quarry on the one side, and over the road we had, like, kind of fields as well. And it didn't feel isolated as such, because I knew just down the road we had a little, town shopping, and there was like shops, not, probably about a 5 minute walk, a little, like newsagents. So, yeah, I mean, it was all right. I felt a little bit isolated because, I'd left my friends. I was 18, but I couldn't drive yet, and so I kind of left them. I didn't really have a job. I was still on a sort of training course, and that was a massively long journey for me, because rather than going from one area in Birmingham to his training course, I now had to go from the other side of Birmingham into Birmingham and then over to his training course. It was like a really big um, undertaking for me. So this was about 1985. Um, Moved into the house with my dad, my mom, two brothers, maybe three, and there was myself, and we had a dog. And but yeah, what happened then was that my one brother kind of moved out. He got married in '86. Then my other brother moved out shortly after. He got his own house. Sadly, my mom passed in 1987. So that just kind of left me, my dad, and the dog. And like I said, his house was really, really long. And we had on the one end you had. I mean, I had a tiny little bedroom on the one end, so my bedroom would have been sort of there, or I suppose there if you're looking from the camera. And then my mom and dad's room was sort of would have been opposite me, and they had ensuite and all that kind of stuff. And we had this kind of corridor that linked. They had the bathroom, and then it linked another two rooms, big bedroom at the end with two windows, one facing out garden, one facing forward onto the road. So it was a big house to rattle around in, really. And because, in the living room, it was like a through room. So it was like, yeah, you had, yeah, I mean, I guess at one time it might have been two rooms, but it was all through. So if you sat right by the front window, and turn around, you could actually see all the way through to the back window. And it was kind of like in an L shaped, so sort of like that, and you could sort of see right through to there, and that's where the dining table was, and we never had any curtains up at the back because there's no need, there's no one looking in. But I absolutely hated it, terrified me, and the whole house actually was really, really terrifying. And I never really kind of like occurred to me until people had moved out, but I remember even at the age of, in my early 20s, 21, 22, I'd be walking down the corridor between the rooms in the middle of the day, in the middle of summer, and I'd just be frozen to the spot because I imagined that the feeling was like something is literally stood behind me watching what I'm doing, and it didn't feel normal. It felt really, it was an awful feeling, and I was scared and I hated it. My dad would sometimes go away and see relatives, and so I'd be in the house by myself, and I couldn't look at the back window because there was no curtains, and all I could see was black. And then it goes down the garden, down into the orchard, down to the field, into the. So it wasn't like I had an imagination. I wasn't really kind of thinking. I was just frightened of looking at this back window. But I mean, when my dad was there, it was everything was fine. So, but then what happened? The story I want to get to actually happened in 1989. So it was a couple of years after my mum passed, and I was busy. I was working as an engineer, so I was busy out. I was on the road quite a few evenings. We'd be on a rota, so I'd finish at 9:30 at night, and so I was very busy. I wasn't scared of being out. I wasn't scared of the dark. Wasn't scared of strange people. I met many of them as an engineer, but there was something about his house. It just it disturbed me a bit. But saying that, I at that age, I mean, now at my age now, in my 50s, I can have nights where I might only sleep for 5 hours, and I wake up and it's. But back then, when I was like in my early 20s, I could sleep through anything. I was a sleep expert. I could have siestas. I could have nothing bothered me. Um, so the one night, and this was in the summer of '89, I am asleep, and I remember I had something like a dream, but one of those that you just can't remember. I just remember the only thing I remember about the dream was bright light, and I wake up, and then um, yeah, and then that was it. So I woke up at 2:30 in the morning, and it was dark. It was I think it was, even though it was June, God, I think it was probably mid-June or something like that. I woke up about 2:30 in the morning, and all I could remember was a dream, bright light, waking up. Um, Next night, I wake up at 2:30 again, and it wasn't like I had another dream. I just woke up at 2:30. So I started waking up at 2:30 every night, and for no reason. There was no external environmental influence or factors that were dictating me waking up. So um, there was no regular sounds outside. For example, I mean, it was just a field across the road. but traffic was regular, constant, pretty quiet most of the time. It wasn't the busiest of roads. It was, but it was, had its traffic moments in the morning, maybe a little bit of the evening. Um, but it was always okay, and so there's no reason for me to be waking up. Nothing to do with the neighbours either. We were detached houses, and couldn't explain it. This was going on. It was going on night after night. Waking up at 2:30, and then another weird thing occurred, which was that obviously I was running around in shorts quite a lot. I think it was quite warm as well, warm summer, 89. And a friend of mine actually said she was working in a hospital as a pharmacist, but obviously, mixing with doctors and all sorts. But she said, "Oh, when did you have an operation on your leg?" And so my reaction was, "Hey, what are you talking about?" And sorry, just let me have a drink. And he says, what are you talking about?" I said, "Well, I said, what are you talking about?" He said, "You've got a scar on the inside of your thigh." So I kind of looked down, and I had like a white line, which was kind of like had that sort of like scar tissue type cut tissue, white line. So I don't know. I mean, there was nothing. I thought I did think to myself, have I scratched myself? I was doing a lot of sports, so uh, but there was nothing about, there was nothing that had strained or anything like that. Hadn't cut anything, hadn't run into any bushes in the garden or anything like that. So I couldn't really explain what this like scar tissue white line was, but it was there, and it was there for a while. So I don't really know where it came from, but it was a bit of a mystery. And anyway, I I'm like this every night, waking up at 2:30, from probably mid-June, and it kind of culminated in a really strange night. And this was like a dream I do remember, because occasionally I get this white light dream, and I thought maybe I'm just experiencing something. I didn't really know about science or anything to do with lights or night terrors or anything like that. But I thought maybe there's something recurring in me, like my body clocks out or something. Um, but yeah, it kind of sort of came on towards. I think it was just the end of summer. If I think it was just before maybe September, and I had this dream in the night, and it was really. I mean, it was terrifying without actually, anything of terror appearing in it. So essentially, what happened was I wake up in my bed, and got a bright light. This time it's not coming through a window; it's coming from the door, but it's coming from behind the door, if you know what I mean. So the door's actually closed, but this white light's coming from behind the door. And in this dream, I just remembered that the bedroom that I was in seemed higher. So the ceilings seemed a lot higher, and I seemed a lot smaller. So I was like a very small in this bed, looking at this door, with a very high ceiling, and I was absolutely terrified. I was waiting for someone to come through, and I couldn't really sort of quantify how scared I was. It was really, really terrifying. So I remember, that, um, as if like I cut to a different scene. My mom, I can't remember whether I was seeing her or whether she was just talking to me, but my mom was actually saying, um, "Don't worry, whatever comes through that door, I'm here to protect you, and you don't need to worry about any of this. I'm here to protect you. Don't get too scared." Um, and it was just so weird. So the next day, I kind of wake up, and I immediately remembered a dream. I'm thinking, my God, that was a horrible dream. But then I'm thinking, I'm lying there, and it was a lovely sunny day, if I remember. And I'm thinking, gosh, it's bright in this room. Um, then I kind of came to the realization that I was actually in the room that was next door. So just to actually fill you in, when my brothers moved out, I went from the little room. I moved up to um, my other brother's room, but then the room at the end, and I didn't go in that room. That was quite big, actually. I don't know why I didn't. I chose the smaller one. But yeah, so I have this experience, and my room is literally opposite the bigger room. So I went to sleep in that room, but I kind of wake up in this room, and the crazy thing was, I'm lying there thinking, "Oh my God, you're in a different room." Obviously, remembered in a dream, I thought, you know what? You must have got scared and just got up and sleepwalked your way into this room and climbed into bed. But it was then that I kind of stopped and thought about this. As I lay in bed, the actual sheets were tight around my neck and everything was still tucked in. See, my dad being ex-military, he knew how to make a bed, and I lay there thinking that it is really weird. I've obviously been sleepwalking, but the sheets are like literally tight around there as if someone's made the bed with me in it. Um, I mean, it was just really, really bizarre. As if somebody had picked me up, moved me, carried me into another room, and slid me into a bed. And and the weird thing was that the very next evening I went to sleep and I just slept normal right away through. Didn't no waking up at 2:30, no bright lights. I just literally slept all the way through, and can't figure out what to this day what any of this meant. Then the other strange thing was the white mark that I had on inside my leg, and we didn't even notice this until a couple of weeks later. The one that looked like scar tissue, completely gone, disappeared. So, and this was 1989, and it was just a really, really odd experience, and one that I can't really sort of explain. I don't really want to put, words and knowledge to this, because obviously, as we get more knowledgeable about stuff to do with paranormal, we start to, fit our stories into, current knowledge about stuff. And, this was 1989. I had no ideas. The only story that was around at this time, I think it might be 1988 that came out. But the only story from 1988, um, that was about, I think it was about UFO, a suspected abduction, an alleged abduction, um, in an area called Castle Vale, which when, I read about it with my work pals, we we were just rolling about laughing because it was just such a, if you're going to get abducted by aliens, it's in forests, it's somewhere remote, it's not in the middle of, it's not coming from a housing estate, to a factory, for your shift. It's and there is a story about the story. Maybe I will try and dig that story up. But that was my only kind of knowledge. That was the only point of that was my only was it my only point of oh shit, what's the word? But yeah, no, that's the only thing I kind of really knew about paranormal was, the little stories that you read like that. And so yeah, I couldn't figure out what it was. And about 5, 6 years later, I was friends with an older woman, and um, we kind of met in the pub, and we just kind of hit it off. So I started kind of popping around to a house that we both lived. I think I was still living up until about. No, I actually moved back to Birmingham by then, but she lives near Walsall anyway, and she lives on the back of a place called the Arboretum. And we were talking and just having a chat. I think it's about 1995, 96. we're having a chat about, weird things that have happened to us, paranormal stuff. And she said, "Well, I've got a story to tell you." So she starts telling me a story about something that happened in 1989, which was coincidental because I'd never spoken about my story. And she was saying that she was in bed. Um, she just turned the light out to to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, there was a blinding white light outside the window, and she remembered she was kind of half out of it, which is kind of weird because if something jolts you just as you're going to sleep, you're not half asleep, you're wide awake straight away. Um, but something kind of like jolted her out of his sleep, but not fully, and so she was like still a bit hazy, and she remembered as this bright light was outside a window, she said to herself, "Roll out of bed, roll out of a bed now." And it was almost like she was kind of willing herself against whatever was, happening. So what she told me was she rolled out of bed, and she fell onto the floor. And when she hit the floor, the bed came down next to her, obviously where it had been. So essentially, she's saying that the bed was levitated. She was on top of the bed, and she rolled out of bed. Bed hit the floor. White light outside, gone, went out. That was it. And that was weird because that happened in the summer of 1989, and my experience also happened in the summer of 1989. And make of that what you will. But it's very, very strange. Years later, a couple of years back actually, as one of the administrators, the owners of, you could say the owner of a Facebook group, I was recounting his very same story, and he said, "Oh, he messaged me privately." Um, I thought it's not like him to do that. He's a decent bloke, but he's not one of those to start whispering in the old ears. Like, um, "I've got something to tell you on it." But yeah, he messaged me privately and he said, "Very interesting story of yours. I've got a picture." And he showed me this picture, and it was basically there was a figure, dressed in white, and it was stood in the middle of a quarry. And so my first impression was, well, okay, so you got a figure of a person stood in the middle of a quarry dressed in white. And he said, at the time of that the picture came to him, there was obviously a reason for it, that getting obtaining his picture. I think he said that they investigated. Um, they actually went down to the quarry and investigated, who this person could have been. And every employee, I mean, this was during the day, so it was obviously during a working day, probably in this quarry. Every employee, or person that I spoke to, said there is no way that we would allow someone just dressed in white to actually be on in a quarry. You have to wear high vis, proper, headwear and head like helmets and stuff like that. He said safety helmet. And nobody would be on his quarry. And this was directly in the quarry at the back of my house. So probably nothing to do with my experience, but when you start to hear about all these little things, your mind starts to kind of think. Um, but I will say about my house, there was definitely something almost evil in that house, and whether that had anything to do with anything. Also, I will say that I discovered years later that there is a ley line, probably about quarter of a kilometre from my house, and it kind of like cuts through. And this is the same ley line that goes through the centre of Sutton Park, and this ley line then travels right up just underneath Castle Ring. It's the very same ley line, goes from one end of the country to the other. So I just wonder whether there was something going on that maybe the ley line. I've often wondered, you see, with ley lines, is it like 2 foot wide? Is a ley line sort of like a half a kilometre wide? It's no nobody's actually been able to tell me. I guess with these ley lines, they have to go by, you know, I think it joins monuments and stuff like that. But how wide a ley line is, nobody knows. But yeah, anyway, do you know what? I hope you enjoyed that, and geez, that's my tale of basically something weird that happened. I do have lots of other stories that I remember, and if anybody asks, you know, it's oh, was it these things that got you into the paranormal? God, no, it was all the stuff that happened to me when I was younger was absolutely 100% um cast iron, terrifying, and I would, if somebody said to me, "Oh, do you fancy getting involved with paranormal?" I would have said, "No, no way," because it was just too scary. And I still shudder at some of these stories now, you know, because I just remember how terrified I was at the time, and yeah, it really affected me, to be honest. I felt, you know, for some of them, I felt, you know, scared in my own room, in my own bedroom, you know, my own in the house, with full of people, you know, brothers, moms, dads, dogs. I was just really scared, and you know, and yeah, but those are for other stories. But hey, I hope you enjoyed this telling of a tale, and you know, everything I said, to the best of my knowledge, is true. I wouldn't make something like this up because it's just, you know, if I was going to make something like this up, I would embellish it beyond belief. But as it is, I can't explain it. I don't want to put any words to what it could have possibly been, because you know, ultimately, nobody wants to think that something's messing with you, your body, you know, your mind. Yeah, nobody wants to think that. I don't like to think I'm somebody else's experiment. So yeah. Um, okay. I'm gonna leave it there, and hope you know enjoyed this. And I will probably be back. I've got an investigation on Saturday, so hopefully I'll be a bit more video evidence of that. So till next time, take care of yourselves, and speak to you.